Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Session 2 is entitled The Impact of Conflict of Interest Policies on Innovation. And we have 3 different perspectives: industry, academia, and government. Our first speaker is Gabriela Lavezzari. She's the Assistant Vice President for Scientific Affairs at PhRMA, which represents the large pharmaceutical companies. And she's going to give the industry perspectives. Thanks very much, Gabriela.
Well, thanks, Bernie. I'm really glad to be here. It's been a very interesting first panel, so I'm really looking forward to the rest of the day. So I just put out, when we were planning this specific workshop, and as a disclosure, I'm in the planning committees, so I have a personal and kind of professional conflict within this specific workshop. We were focused on specific question, focusing on what the industry perspective of the impact of conflict of interest, how different institutions have been impacted, and what are the drivers to really of success to spark development, and how we deal with conflict of interest policy. And those are the same kind of question that PhRMA had when we look at the entire research ecosystem. So we thought to kind of take a step back and try to understand a little bit better about the landscape, and focusing a lot on who are the different key stakeholders that are impacted and should be involved in the next conversations, moving to what actually constitute a conflict of interest, and then moving to the regulation and policies, how those have impacted medical innovation, but also, as I said, the whole research ecosystem. So when we look at the drug development pipeline, I'm going to focus a lot of my talks more in the R&D space, and leaving to the expert maybe later into the day to talk about the post-marketing, the CME, and the physician education. But when we look at the drug development pipeline, we look at the basic research development and regulatory side, there are a lot of different key stakeholders that are being impacted, some directly and some indirectly. So when we look at the basic and translational research, we have academia, research institution, the NIH, and also industry. When we moved into the development, it's more industry and physician and PIs that conduct clinical trials within the research institution with or without compounds from our industry. And then more into the regulatory space, FDA, physician, experts that are being called by the FDA to help them understand the role of a drug that is going to be possibly approved, and then, of course, advocacy group. So the way we have approached this landscape analysis is to actually ask different key stakeholders in the ecosystem specific questions. And we have looked at the academic research, the industry, the professional association advocacy group, the government and the regulators, and also legal expert, health policy, and bioethicists. So really a variety of different opinion and expertise. So what the term conflict of interest means, and I think Bernie really spoke a lot about this, that the presence of improperly influenced judgment more frequently is around, what is defined by the policy, which is surrounding just about financial conflict of interest. But I'll take a step, an extra step, that is the perception, and we talked about this in the previous section. So my question has always been what is the delta between what is a true conflict of interest and what is defined by the policy and what is the perception? Can we better define how far are we from the nucleus of the problem? So when we look at the conflict of interest, and we bring back again Venn diagram, as Bernie has done already, maybe with a little different flavor. So we have from one side the unbiased, so the research is not influenced by any other interest. To the completely opposite side of the spectrum, we have true conflict of interest, where we provide an example. But then there is this intersection between the two that is really not well defined, which I think leads to the perception and leads to uncertainty. So when we ask to our key stakeholder, what, according to your experience and expertise, what constitutes conflict of interest? The majority said is tangible financial, followed by intangible. And I think Sharon mentioned, tangible financial, it's easy to really measure. So it's much easier to really point out a finger. So we're losing a little bit of, I think, understanding and also granularity when it comes to intentional, personal, professional, and institutional conflict of interest. But they're still recognized. So I think, if we can bring a little bit more clarity, those conflict of interest might have the same impact that possibly a financial relationship could bring. So when we look at the relationship across the different key stakeholders, so we really look at the whole ecosystem. We have the policymaker, we have influencer, like the media, the professional medical association, the advocacy group. And that influence the key stakeholders that are responsible for enacting the conflict of interest policy. But the question is how the patients are being impacted by this. And I think still that needs to be determined. So to the juice of the study that we have done, we have found 5 areas where the effects of policy and perception of conflict of interest, the greatest impact. And I'll go into details, but just to summarize, we have seen that the conflict of interest policies has impaired collaboration, increased resource burden, limited the FDA access to the best experts, decreased physician education, and decreased communication. So when we look at the academic research and we ask, exactly how that was impacted, we see that at the top of the line, pay company speeches was the one that the most impacted, followed by resources invested to monitor the policy. But then if we kind of go a little bit down by the bar graph, we see that the time to initiate a collaboration, how that was impacted. And then we look at the CME and how last, I think it's kind of a control, the collaboration with government and academia is not really being impacted. So it's really the relationship between the industry and the academia. So this is just to go back to those 5 bullets. Number 1 is the impact of conflict of interest on research activities. And we have split the data between industry and academia. And it's apparent that in both cases, in both key stakeholders, the policies impair the time to initiate a collaboration. But I think what's more frightening is that not just the time that it takes, but also the ability or desire to even start a collaboration. So we're really damaging even potential collaboration, and not just the one that there is desire to do it and it's just taking a lot of time to actually get to it. Resource burden, I think we heard from the panel, but also from some of the participants that came to the microphone. There is a resource burden, and we have seen both on the resource invested to monitor the policy, but also time personally spent on complying with policy. When we go and moving on the pipeline, we get to the FDA. I particularly like these slides because I think we are in an area where we're trying to push for better therapy, more target therapies, personalized medicine, and more target population that we treat with our molecules. And that really gets to a specific segment of key opinion leaders that really have the expertise and the knowledge to provide feedback to the regulators about a drug. And we have seen that even in big therapeutic area like diabetes or IBD, when we go down to the specific compounds or mechanism of action, there are just few experts, and those, are very difficult to have on committees because they have relationship with industry. So FDA needs to get into the waiver structure to actually be able to have these people express their opinion. But it's really, as we move into this personalized medicine era, many, there's going to be less and less researchers and PI and scientists that are so specific, and so they're really the expert. So we need to find a way to really be able to access that scientific expertise. So when we dive into more about the advisory committee, we saw that a lot of were able to participate, but the one that were not able, many were recused to conflict of interest. And then it goes to scheduling, incomplete paperwork, and kind of a combination. So when I look at the FDA challenge in recruiting the best expert, I see kind of a 3-level of issue. One could be a policy, where the current guidelines are too strict on what constitutes a conflict of interest, and experts are not even allowed to participate or even invited. Moving to the next, which is the perception, where even after all the negative publicity, people are afraid of being perceived of having a conflict of interest, and they don't want to serve. And then moving to the not conflict of interest related, which are just, people are busy, and it's just a matter of having their life, the professional and personal life, and it gets into the way. So to conclude, while the actual term of conflict of interest means the presence and properly influenced judgment, more we see it's around the perceived conflict of interest due to the financial relationship with the industry. And extreme instances of true conflict of interest sparked the attention, which led to the negative perception in industry relationship. So in conclusion, we have seen with our research that the policy restriction has led to impaired collaboration, increased resource burden, limited the FDA access to best expert, and again, the decreased physician education and promotional relationship. So when I think about what could be the future approach of handling, currently COI is largely handled through avoidance, and we want to really move to a place where we can better manage the conflict of interest, find better policy, narrow the definition of what is true conflict of interest to remove that perception, and really focus on what are the best practices. And I think the rest of the day will be really important for this group to come up with, suggest what is working and how can we better find a place where we can have access to scientific expertise while we're managing potential conflict of interest.
Thanks very much, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments and questions later. Our second speaker is going to present the academic perspective, and Heather Pierce is from the AAMC, which represents the academic health centers. Heather?